The conference room smelled like stale coffee and fear. 32 employees sat in perfect silence, their faces frozen in that particular expression people wear when they're about to watch someone's life collapse. The glass walls offered no privacy. Everyone on the floor could see in, and everyone was watching. Marcus Webb stood at the head of the table, his work badge dangling from his neck like a noose. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice remained steady. "I can explain." Across from him, CEO Victoria Sterling didn't blink. She held his personnel file open, her manicured finger pressed against the page as if she'd found something contagious. "You were asleep, Marcus, at your desk, during work hours." She paused, letting the words settle like poison. "I have witnesses. I have security footage. I have everything I need." The room was so quiet that Marcus could hear the hum of the servers in the data center below them. The same servers he'd spent the last 48 hours protecting. He opened his mouth to speak, but Victoria raised her hand. "Don't." The word cut through him like a blade. "Security will escort you out. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings." Marcus looked around the table, at his co-workers, his friends, people he'd shared lunches with, people whose children he knew by name. Not one of them met his eyes. That was the moment he understood. It didn't matter what he'd done. It only mattered what they believed. And they believed he was just a tired black man who couldn't keep his eyes open. Marcus Webb was 34 years old and had been working at Sterling Technologies for 6 years. He'd started as a junior systems analyst, the kind of position where you're invisible until something breaks. But Marcus had a gift, an almost supernatural ability to see patterns in code, to understand how systems talk to each other, to find the hidden conversations happening in the digital dark. He'd been promoted 4 times. He was the head of network security now, the guy they called at 3 a.m. when something went wrong, the guy who never complained about the hours, the guy who always showed up. But nobody at Sterling Technologies knew the whole story. At 7:15 every morning, Marcus dropped his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, at school. She had her mother's smile, a fact that both comforted and destroyed him every single time he saw it. Her mother, Elena, had died 2 years ago. Cancer. Fast and brutal and utterly without mercy. Marcus had been a husband, and then he'd been a widower, and then he'd been a single father, all within the span of 18 months. He'd learned to braid hair from YouTube tutorials. He'd learned to cook from his grandmother's old recipes. He'd learned to be both parents, and he'd learned to do it while maintaining the appearance of a man who had everything under control. The truth was, he was exhausted. Constantly. Bone-deep exhausted in a way that sleep alone couldn't fix. But he never complained. He couldn't afford to. At Sterling Technologies, Marcus was the only black man in his department. He'd noticed this on his first day, and he'd noticed it every single day since. It wasn't something he talked about. It was just something he carried, a quiet awareness that he had to work harder, be better, stay later, smile more, never make mistakes, never show weakness, never let them see him struggle. He'd perfected the art of invisibility. Every morning, he'd arrive before anyone else, make his coffee, and spend the first hour checking the security logs. He knew the network better than he knew his own apartment. He knew which servers ran hot. He knew which employees clicked on suspicious emails. He knew where the vulnerabilities were, and he knew how to fix them before anyone even noticed they existed. His coworkers liked him. They'd say things like, "Marcus is so calm, and Marcus never gets stressed, and I don't know how he does it." They didn't know that he sometimes cried in the bathroom. They didn't know that he'd sold his car to pay for Maya's medical bills after a respiratory infection. They didn't know that he ate the same meal every day, rice and beans, so Maya could have fresh fruit and vegetables. They didn't know that his greatest fear wasn't losing his job. It was losing his daughter. The 7th floor of Sterling Technologies was a monument to corporate efficiency. Glass walls, minimalist furniture, muted colors that suggested professionalism rather than personality. The kind of place where you could work for years and never really know anyone. Marcus's cubicle was in the corner, tucked away from the main walkway. He'd chosen it deliberately. It gave him a view of the data center below through a large window, and it kept his back to the wall. He'd learned early that you never wanted your back to a door. His desk was cluttered with sticky notes, reminders, passwords, and more passwords. A framed photo of Maya sat next to his keyboard, her gap-toothed smile a constant reminder of what he was working for. A coffee mug that said, "World's okayest dad," held pens that he never used. He arrived at 6:30 a.m. on the day before everything changed. The parking garage was empty. The elevators were silent. The security guard at the front desk nodded at him the way they always did, a brief acknowledgement between two men who understood the value of quiet efficiency. Marcus settled into his cubicle, logged into his system, and began his routine. Check the logs, review the alerts, make sure nothing had triggered overnight. Everything was normal, until it wasn't. At 7:03 a.m., a notification appeared on his screen. Unknown access attempt, port 443, external IP, redacted. 3 failed login attempts. Marcus frowned. Failed login attempts weren't unusual. Bots tried to breach corporate networks constantly. But this one was different. The source IP was routing through multiple countries, each hop making it harder to trace. He dug deeper, and then he saw it. A sophisticated attack vector designed to bypass their firewall protocols. It was elegant, almost beautiful in its complexity. Someone had spent months preparing this. Someone knew the system intimately. Someone was trying to destroy them. Marcus's fingers flew across the keyboard. He isolated the threat, created a containment zone, and began tracing the attack pattern. But this wasn't a simple hack. This was a coordinated assault. Multiple points of entry, each designed to distract while the real breach happened elsewhere. He worked for 8 hours straight. No breaks, no food, no bathroom. He was still working at 5 p.m. when his coworker Sarah passed by. "You're still here?" she asked, carrying her handbag and a gym bag. Marcus barely looked up. "Some security issues to handle. I'll be here a while." Sarah frowned. "Did you at least eat?" "I'll grab something later." She'd left him a granola bar. He'd forgotten to eat it. At 11 p.m., Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from the babysitter. "Maya's asking for you. She had a nightmare." Marcus closed his eyes. For a brief moment, he felt the crushing weight of being in two places at once. Here, fighting a digital war, and home, where his daughter needed him. He couldn't leave. The attack was escalating. If he walked away now, the entire network would be compromised. Employee records, client data, everything. He called Maya instead. "Hey, baby girl." "Daddy?" Her voice was small, trembling. "There was a monster. Under my bed." Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. "Did you tell the monster you're a superhero?" "I did, but he didn't listen." "Then you have to be extra brave until I get home, okay? Can you be brave for me?" Maya sniffled. "I'll try. That's my girl. I love you." "I love you too, Daddy." He hung up and stared at the ceiling for 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds to breathe. Then he went back to work. At 2 a.m., the final breach attempt occurred. Marcus caught it, contained it, documented everything. At 3:30 a.m., he sat back in his chair, the enormity of what he'd just done washing over him. He'd prevented a data breach that would have cost the company millions. He'd protected the personal information of thousands of employees and clients. He'd stayed up for 48 hours straight to save a company that didn't even know what he was doing. At 4 a.m., he leaned forward to send a detailed report to his supervisor, David. His head hit the desk. Victoria Sterling had built an empire from nothing. Her father had been a janitor at a tech firm in the 1980s. She'd grown up watching him clean the offices of people who didn't know his name. She'd watched him come home exhausted, his hands cracked and raw from industrial cleaning chemicals, and she'd sworn that she would never be invisible. She'd made good on that promise. Sterling Technologies was worth $400 million. She'd started it in her apartment at the age of 26 with a single idea, and a lot of determination. She'd been named one of the top female entrepreneurs under 35. She'd been on magazine covers. She'd been featured in documentaries. She'd earned every single accolade, and she knew it. But there was something about the success that had never quite filled the emptiness inside her. Something about the way people looked at her, admiring, yes, but also wary. Something about the way her employees treated her with a deference that felt more like fear than respect. She told herself she didn't care. She wasn't there to be liked. She was there to be effective. Victoria arrived at the office at 7:15 a.m., as she always did. Her driver held the door. Her assistant handed her a latte with oat milk, exactly the way she liked it, because Maria knew the consequences of mistakes. The morning was ordinary. Review budgets, approve expenditures, sign off on a new marketing campaign that she didn't really understand but trusted her team to execute. At 9 a.m., she walked through the employee floor. She did this sometimes, not to micromanage, but to remind people that she was real, that the CEO wasn't a myth, that there was a human being at the top. That was when she saw him. A black man in a pressed blue shirt, his head resting on his desk, his breathing slow and even. Asleep. During work hours. With his laptop still open in front of him. Victoria stopped walking. The employees around him noticed her pause. They noticed the tightening of her jaw. They noticed the way her fingers curled around her coffee cup. "Mr. Webb?" Marcus didn't move. "Mr. Webb." She said his name louder this time, and he jerked awake, blinking rapidly, his eyes unfocused and groggy. For a moment he seemed confused, disoriented, like he'd forgotten where he was. Then he saw her face, and the confusion turned to dread. "Ms. Sterling, I can explain. Please come to the conference room." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone carried the kind of authority that didn't require volume. The conference room filled up quickly. HR representatives, department heads, Marcus's immediate supervisor, David, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Victoria sat at the head of the table, her file in front of her, and asked the question that would change everything. "Would you like to tell me what happened, Mr. Webb?" And Marcus, exhausted, sleep-deprived, still in shock, did something that would haunt him later. He didn't tell her about the hack. He didn't tell her about the 48 hours of protecting the company. He just said, "I'm sorry. It won't happen again." Victoria Sterling believed in efficiency. She believed in accountability. She believed that if you couldn't handle the basic expectations of your job, you didn't deserve to be there. Her father had cleaned toilets for $8 an hour, and he'd never once fallen asleep on the job. If he could do it, anyone could. The sound of her own heels clicking against the polished floor gave her a sense of control that she desperately needed right now. This was the part she hated, the part where she had to be ruthless. But leaders were ruthless. That was the lesson she'd learned early and often. "Mr. Webb, I want you to know that this isn't personal." Marcus Webb stood before her. He'd gathered his belongings from his cubicle, placed them into a cardboard box that had seen other employees leave before him. His work badge was off. His tie was slightly crooked. In the dim hallway light, she noticed for the first time that he looked thinner than she remembered. His cheekbones were sharper, and there was a hollow exhaustion in his face that sleep alone couldn't fix. "If this was a personal decision, I could be understanding. I'd make exceptions." Victoria tilted her head, the way she'd learned from a leadership seminar back when she was still trying to be liked. "But this is Sterling Technologies. We have standards. We have expectations. When people don't meet them, it affects everyone." Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. His hands tightened on the cardboard box, and Victoria noticed a framed photo on top of everything inside. A little girl. Gap-toothed smile. She looked like him. "I've worked here for 6 years," Marcus said finally, his voice quiet but steady. "I've been the head of network security for 3 of those years. I'm at work at 6:30 every morning, and I'm the last person to leave every night. I've never been written up. I've never been late. I've never fallen asleep at your desk until today?" Victoria interrupted. That's true, and I'm sorry that happened. But the fact remains that you did, Mr. Webb. In front of witnesses, in front of your team. What does it say about this company if we allow that kind of behavior? Marcus's eyes widened. For a moment, the exhaustion in his face shifted into something else, something that looked almost like anger. But it was gone before Victoria could properly identify it. Ms. Sterling, he said slowly, I understand that this doesn't look good, but I need you to understand something. Whatever excuse you're about to offer, she cut him off, holding up a manicured hand. I've heard it all before. Work-related stress, personal issues, health problems. It doesn't matter. What matters is that my employees trust me to maintain a professional environment. When I fail to do that, I fail all of them. She watched his face, waiting for tears. Most people cried. A man this exhausted, this clearly overworked. She'd seen the breakdown coming for weeks now. Everyone had. The way he never took breaks. The way he stayed late. The way he volunteered for extra assignments. He was burning out, and burning out meant he'd become a liability. Security will escort you out, she said. You have 30 minutes. Marcus felt his feet moving, but he didn't feel connected to them. He walked down the hallway past cubicles where his co-workers pretended not to see him. He walked past Sarah, who had tears streaming down her face but didn't dare say a word. He walked past David, his supervisor, who stared at his desk with the expression of a man who'd just failed to save someone he cared about. And for the first time in 6 years, Marcus allowed himself to think about the color of his skin. He'd never wanted to be the one who blamed racism. He'd worked too hard to earn the respect of his co-workers. He'd never wanted to be the employee who cried discrimination every time something went wrong. But as he walked past the glass conference room, where he'd spent the last 48 hours fighting off hackers who were trying to destroy this very company, Marcus felt something shift inside him. They'd never asked. Not once. He could have been protecting the entire network from a catastrophic breach, and not one person had asked him why he was asleep. Not one person had checked his computer. Not one person had taken a moment to consider that maybe, just maybe, there was more to the story than a tired black man who couldn't keep his eyes open. The security guard walked him to the elevator, and the door slid open to reveal an empty car. Marcus stepped inside, still carrying his cardboard box, still clutching Maya's photograph. This is your stop, sir, the guard said. Marcus looked at him, a white man maybe 10 years older than him, with kind eyes and a wedding ring. This man had children, Marcus could tell. He had that exhausted, proud look that only parents had. I know, Marcus said. The elevator doors closed. Marcus sat in his car for 27 minutes. He didn't cry. He'd learned long ago that crying solved nothing, that crying was a luxury he couldn't afford. Instead, he stared through the windshield at the Sterling Technologies building and tried to process what had just happened. 6 years. 6 years of work, and it came down to one moment of exhaustion. 6 years of sacrifice, and they'd shown him the door like he was nothing. His phone buzzed. Maya's school. Hello? Mr. Webb, we're calling because Maya's school day is over, and no one has come to pick her up. Marcus closed his eyes. Of course. Of course it was pickup time. Of course he'd forgotten. I'm on my way, he said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He ended the call and gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. The cardboard box sat on the passenger seat, Maya's photograph on top. She'd drawn a picture of him in the corner, a stick figure with a cape and a crown. You're a superhero, Daddy, she'd said when she gave it to him. He didn't feel like a superhero right now. He felt like a failure. Victoria Sterling was having a good day. The morning had been productive. The incident with Webb had been handled efficiently, and she'd already scheduled a meeting with HR to discuss updating the company's attendance policies. She'd signed off on 4 major contracts. She'd had a productive call with the board. Now she was sitting in her corner office, looking out over the city skyline, and feeling that familiar sense of rightness that came from being in control. Her phone rang. David, head of the IT department. Ms. Sterling, We need to talk." There was something in his voice that made her sit up straighter, something that sounded almost like anger. "I'm listening." "I just finished reviewing the security logs from the past 72 hours. I wanted to know why our firewall flags were tripped. I wanted to know what happened." He paused. "I found out." Victoria frowned. "What are you talking about?" "We had a coordinated cyber attack attempt. Somebody tried to breach our system. Multiple entry points, sophisticated encryption, the works. Someone had been planning this for months." Victoria's blood went cold. "Were they successful?" "Barely. Someone caught them. Someone isolated the threat, contained the breach, and documented everything. Someone stayed up for 48 hours straight to stop it from happening." She felt something twist in her stomach. Someone? Marcus Webb. The name hit her like a physical blow. He didn't just stop the attack, Ms. Sterling. He documented every single attempt. He isolated the source. He prevented a breach that would have cost us millions in data loss and legal fees. David's voice cracked slightly. "I had to pull the logs myself because no one reported it. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He just handled it. And then he fell asleep, and you fired him." Victoria's hand trembled as she set down her phone. She stared at the city skyline and felt the world tilt beneath her. Victoria Sterling didn't apologize. She'd never apologized. Not for business decisions, not for personal mistakes, not for anything. Apologies were weakness. Apologies were the admission that you'd made a mistake, and she didn't make mistakes. But she couldn't shake the image of Marcus Webb's face, the hollow exhaustion in his eyes, the way his hands tightened on that cardboard box, the photo of his daughter on top. She found his file in the HR database and pulled up his emergency contact information. His mother's number was out of date. His wife's number had been disconnected. His address on file was an apartment in a neighborhood that Victoria had never visited. She didn't have another choice. At 6:00 p.m., Victoria Sterling, CEO of a $400 million company, drove to a part of the city she'd never seen before. The buildings were older here. The streets were narrower. The people on the sidewalks looked at her car, a black BMW, like it didn't belong. She parked in front of a worn-down apartment building and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, trying to summon the courage to get out. Marcus Webb lived here. This building, with its graffiti and broken front door and flickering streetlights, was where the man who'd saved her company called home. Victoria got out of the car and walked up the steps. The inside of the building was dimly lit. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and something else, something sour that she couldn't identify. The stairs creaked under her expensive heels. She found the apartment door marked 3B and knocked 3 times. Nothing. Victoria knocked again, harder this time. "Mr. Webb, it's Victoria Sterling. I need to talk to you." She heard shuffling footsteps, and then the door opened a crack. Marcus stared out at her through the gap. He'd changed out of his work clothes and into a t-shirt and sweatpants. The exhaustion in his face was deeper now, a bone-deep weariness that seemed to consume him. "There's nothing to talk about," he said. "The security escorted me out. I don't have access to the building. I don't have anything. I need to tell you what I found." Marcus's expression didn't change. "You found the security logs." Victoria blinked. "You knew? But you didn't say anything when I fired you." "I was too tired to argue." He shrugged, the gesture almost indifferent. "I knew that if you'd checked the logs, you'd have found out. And if you didn't check the logs, then it didn't matter anyway." The words stung more than they should have. "I made a mistake, Mr. Webb. I should have listened to you. I should have looked into what happened before I made a decision. I apologize." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and broken and full of something that sounded almost like despair. "You apologize." He shook his head. "Ms. Sterling, do you know what it's like? Being the only black man in your department? Having to work twice as hard just to be seen as average? Having to take every extra shift, every weekend, every late night just so people know you're not lazy? Victoria didn't respond. Every single day, I had to prove myself. Every single hour, I had to be better than everyone else. And even then, the moment I made a mistake, the moment I fell asleep after saving your company from a catastrophic data breach, you threw me out like I was nothing. I didn't know. No, you didn't know. Marcus stepped closer. You didn't know because you never asked. You made a judgment based on what you saw. And what you saw was a tired black man who couldn't keep his eyes open. Victoria Sterling stood in the doorway of Marcus Webb's apartment and felt her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. She'd always believed that her success was a testament to her hard work, that she'd earned everything she'd gotten through sheer determination and intelligence, that she was different from other people, better than other people. But standing here, looking at a man who had everything taken from him through no fault of his own, Victoria realized the truth. She'd been lying to herself. You're right, she said finally. I didn't ask. And I'm sorry. Marcus shook his head. You're sorry. You're sorry that you made a mistake. You're sorry that you didn't check the logs. But you're not sorry about what happened to me. You're not sorry about the way you looked at me and assumed I was a liability. That's not fair. Fair? Marcus laughed again. Ms. Sterling, nothing in my life has ever been fair. I lost my wife to cancer. I'm a single father. I struggle every single day to make ends meet. And I still showed up. I still did my job. I still saved your company. And the moment I fell asleep, you treated me like I was nothing. Victoria opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a small voice came from inside the apartment. Daddy? Both of them turned to look at the doorway where a little girl stood rubbing her eyes. She wore a pink nightgown and had her hair in messy pigtails. Her thumb was in her mouth, a habit that Marcus had been trying to break for 6 months. Baby girl, you're supposed to be in bed, he said softly. I heard voices. Maya's eyes fixed on Victoria. Who's that? Marcus looked at Victoria for a long moment. That's Ms. Sterling. She's someone I used to work with. Why does she look sad? Victoria felt her throat tighten. She looked at this little girl, this child who'd lost her mother and was facing the loss of her father's job, and felt something inside her break. Maya, she said, kneeling down so she was at the child's eye level. I'm sorry. I made a mistake and I hurt your daddy. That wasn't right. Maya stared at her with the unblinking honesty of a 7-year-old. Are you going to fix it? Victoria looked up at Marcus. Yes, she said. I'm going to fix it. Marcus didn't want Victoria's help. He'd been burned too many times. He'd trusted people before, and they'd let him down. He'd believed in the system, and the system had failed him. But Maya was watching. Maya was watching her father be offered a lifeline, and Maya was waiting to see if he'd take it. Ms. Sterling, he said, his voice heavy. I don't want your charity. I've worked too long and too hard to be saved like this. Charity? Victoria stood up, her eyes blazing. Is that what you think this is? I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you what you deserve, what you earned. You saved my company. You protected my employees. You did something extraordinary, and I treated you like garbage. That's not charity. That's accountability. Marcus stared at her. You fired me in front of everyone. You made me walk through the office like a criminal. You made me feel worthless. I know. Victoria's voice broke slightly. And I can't take that back. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make it right. By giving me my job back? No. Victoria shook her head. That's the easy way out. A few months from now, people will forget what happened. You'll be the guy who got fired and rehired, and I'll be the CEO who made a mistake and fixed it. Everyone wins, and nothing changes. Marcus frowned. Then what are you offering? Victoria took a deep breath. I'm offering you a partnership. I want you to work with me to build a better company. I want to create a culture where people are seen, where people are valued, where no one has to prove themselves every single day. I want to change the way we do things, and I want you to help me. Changing things isn't easy. It shouldn't be. Victoria's jaw tightened. Easy changes don't last. Real change is hard. It requires sacrifice. It requires discomfort. It requires people like you to speak up and people like me to listen. Marcus looked at Maya, who was staring up at him with her mother's eyes. What about my salary? I can't afford a pay cut. Victoria smiled. I thought we could start with a significant raise and a bonus for saving the company, and maybe a seat on the board of directors. 6 months later, Marcus Webb walked into the new headquarters of Sterling Technologies. The old building had been renovated. The glass walls were replaced with actual walls. The cubicles were gone, replaced by collaborative spaces and private offices. The energy was different, warmer somehow, more human. Victoria Sterling stood in the lobby, waiting for him. Mr. Webb, she extended her hand. Welcome back. Marcus shook it. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Please, she smiled. Call me Victoria. He walked through the building and saw the changes she'd implemented. A daycare center for employees' children, a wellness room with couches where people could take naps, a policy that required managers to check in with their employees regularly to make sure they weren't struggling. But the most important change was hidden in the employee handbook. A new section, mandatory reading for every single employee. The Webb Protocol. If you see a coworker who is struggling, ask questions, show compassion, never assume you understand their story. Marcus stopped in front of the wall where the handbook was displayed. This is unexpected. Victoria shrugged. I told you I wanted to change things. But this is different. It's a whole new culture. That was the point. Victoria looked at him carefully. Marcus, I can't undo what happened to you. I can't erase the way I treated you, but I can try to make sure it never happens to anyone else. And that's why I need you here, to make sure we stay on the right path. Marcus nodded slowly. He'd been so angry 6 months ago, so hurt, so convinced that the system would never change. But standing here now, looking at the changes Victoria had made, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I accept the seat on the board, he said, and I accept the partnership. But I have one condition. Name it. I want to be in charge of the Webb Protocol. I want to make sure it stays true to its purpose. I want to build something that truly helps people. Victoria smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way. Months passed, and the changes at Sterling Technologies began to ripple outward. Marcus spoke at conferences. He wrote articles. He advocated for better workplace policies, for compassion and leadership, for the kind of cultural shift that changed lives. He was invited to the White House. He was featured in the Wall Street Journal. He was the face of a movement that was bigger than him, bigger than one company, bigger than one mistake. But through it all, Marcus never forgot what had brought him here. The sleepless nights, the fear, the humiliation, and the moment when one person, someone who'd wronged him, chose to make it right. At the annual employee retreat, Victoria Sterling stood in front of the entire company and told the story. She told them about Marcus Webb, about the hack, about her own failure. She told them about how she'd been wrong, and then she introduced a new award, the Marcus Webb Award for Excellence in Service. She held up the plaque, and Marcus saw that it featured a small inscription at the bottom. For those who serve when no one is watching. Marcus walked to the front of the room, and Victoria handed him the plaque. I think this should be yours first, she said quietly. Marcus looked at the award, then at his co-workers. He saw faces that had once looked away from him, faces that had once avoided his gaze. He saw Sarah smiling through tears. He saw David nodding with pride. He saw all of them, and for the first time, he felt like he belonged. Marcus arrived home that night to find Maya waiting for him on the couch. "Hi, Daddy." He set down his briefcase and sat beside her, pulling her onto his lap. She was getting so big now. Her legs were longer, her face was changing, she was growing up so fast. "How was school?" "Good. We're doing a school project. We have to write about someone who's a hero." Marcus smiled. "That sounds nice. Who are you writing about?" Maya looked at him with those big brown eyes. "You? Me?" Marcus laughed. "Baby girl, I'm just a regular person." "No, you're not." Maya shook her head. "You're my superhero. You always have been. Even when things were hard. Even when I was sad. You always made me feel safe." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Oh, baby girl." "I told my teacher about the superhero picture I drew for you. The one with the cape and the crown. She said it was beautiful." Marcus looked at Maya and saw Elena in her smile. He saw his wife, gone for 2 years now, but still with them in every moment, every memory, every heartbeat. "Tell me about the picture again," he said softly. Maya wiggled off his lap and ran to her room, returning moments later with the drawing. It was creased and worn from being handled so many times. "This is you," she said, pointing to the stick figure. "And this is the crown." Marcus studied the drawing, the crooked lines, the messy colors, the love that radiated from every single stroke. "Where's my cape?" he asked. Maya laughed. "You're wearing it, silly. You're always wearing it. You just can't see it." Marcus pulled her into a hug, feeling the warmth of her small body against his chest. "I love you, Maya." "I love you too, Daddy." And in that moment, Marcus Webb didn't feel like a failure. He didn't feel like someone who'd been fired. He didn't feel like someone who'd been humiliated. He felt like someone who'd survived, someone who'd endured, someone who'd taken the worst moments of his life and turned them into something beautiful. He felt like a superhero. Final scene. Marcus placed the superhero drawing on his desk. It sat next to the plaque Victoria had given him, the first Marcus Webb Award for Excellence in Service. 2 symbols of everything he'd overcome, everything he'd achieved. He looked out the window of his new office, a corner office with a view of the city, a view that represented a future he'd never imagined. His phone buzzed, a message from Victoria. "Board meeting tomorrow, 9:00 a.m. I'll have coffee ready." Marcus smiled and typed back, "I'll bring the donuts." He looked at the drawing one more time, and he thought about his little girl, about the future he was building for her, about the legacy he'd leave behind. Marcus Webb had been fired for falling asleep, but he'd built an empire out of the ashes of that humiliation. He'd changed an entire company, he'd changed an entire culture, and he'd changed himself. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more unforgettable stories, and share it with someone who needs this reminder today. Because sometimes the people who seem the weakest are the strongest among us. Sometimes the ones who struggle the most are the ones who save us all. And sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to see the truth. Thank you for watching.